What's up, y'all? Welcome back to Bass Fishing Declassified. In this video, I'm going to be talking about deep diving crankbait fishing, and specifically the process I've gone through over the past 20 years to dial in which deep diving crankbaits I like to throw. I really got into fishing deep diving crankbaits around the 2005 to 2010 range, and the number one crankbait at the time was the Strike King Series 5 crankbait. You guys can remember Kevin Van Dam winning several tournaments on a Sexy Shad Strike King Series 5. And by today's standards, this is really not that much of a deep diving crankbait. It only dives 10 to 12 feet, but this was the premier deep diving crankbait back in the day. And I threw this a lot, and while I did catch some fish on it, I found that I was limited in how deep I could get this bait. And you would see a lot of guys back in the day do the kneel and reel technique, where you basically get down on your knees, stick your rod as far down the water in an attempt to get this bait as deep as possible. There was another option from Strike King that was pretty popular as well, which is the Strike King Series 6. And this is a little bit bigger bodied bait, but it still only dives maybe 12 to 14 feet. And I had a little bit more success with this bait and actually continue to have success with this bait for years to come, but not maybe in the way you'd expect. And I'll talk about that here in a second. There are a lot of other deep diving crankbaits on the market during that time, including the Norman DD22 and several other really good baits, but I was actually sponsored by Strike King at the time, so I basically threw only Strike King baits from the time I was about 10 years old all the way until I was about 20, so you're going to see a lot of Strike King baits in this video and other videos going forward, because that's just what I have a lot of experience with and I have a lot of fish catches on. After a few years though, in the mid-2000s, Strike King came out with a new crankbait that basically took over deep diving crankbait fishing again, and that's the Strike King 6XD. And this is now my number one crankbait, my staple crankbait to this day, and I have caught hundreds, if not thousands of fish on the Strike King 6XD crankbait. There's a lot of things about this bait that make it very unique, and I've tried a lot of other baits over the years, and I'll talk about those in a second, but there's a couple of things I really like about that 6XD that stand apart from other baits in the market. The first is the price. You can get this bait for under $10, which is really affordable, and it's great when you're fishing a deep diving crankbait because you're going to lose some of these baits. You're going to get hung up in brush piles, in rock piles, around offshore structure. So having a bait that you don't necessarily feel that bad about losing is always a good thing because you can put it in the thickest cover possible. And that's one of my recommendations with these deep diving crankbaits. You want to get this bait down into the strike zone and dig the bottom. That's one of the reasons the 6XD is so effective. It dives very quickly when you get it into the water, and it stays down in the strike zone for a very long period of time. A lot of the older deep diving crankbaits that hit that 20-foot range wouldn't dive very quickly. They would get to depth, but it would take a while, and they'd only be down in the strike zone for maybe a third of your cast. But with the 6XD, a lot of times you can keep it in the strike zone for 2/3 of your cast, and you can really target those deep fish a lot more effectively. The other thing about this 6XD that I like is it has a nice wide bill that deflects off cover extremely well. Whenever you're fishing a deep diving crankbait, you want a bill that will actually hit against rocks and wood and things like that, and then you can stop the bait and it will float up, and then you can dig back down and it'll float back up. This will allow you to work it over brush piles, rock piles, stumps, any sort of offshore structure that you're fishing. And by having that nice big wide bill, you deflect cover, and a lot of times that's where you get your bites, is when that bait actually hits off an object. I think that's one of the most common misconceptions with deep diving crankbait fishing, is that anglers think you just need to kind of work the bait in the strike zone or the middle of the water column and not really hit anything because it has the treble hooks. Anglers are scared to get hung up with these treble hooks, so they don't actually make contact with the bottom or with cover. But when I'm getting bit on a 6XD, 95% of my bites are when that bait deflects off an object, off the bottom, off a rock, something like that, and I'm actually making physical contact with an object. I very, very rarely get bit when this bait is just out in open water. So you do want a bait that deflects off cover really, really well. The other few baits I've tried in recent years are really in the Spro lineup. I've tried several different Spro baits. This is the Little John DD. It's a really good bait. It has flat sides, and I feel like at times I can actually get bit better on this bait, especially in like the late fall and in clearer water situations than I can with that 6XD. So this is definitely a bait that I have in my arsenal. One thing I like about this bait again is that it has that nice wide, long bill, so it comes through cover pretty well, and it just has a little bit of a different profile to that 6XD. If we kind of compare the two baits, the 6XD is a little bit bigger and it's a little bit wider, so that more narrow kind of wobble will get bit. And I've caught, again, hundreds of fish on this Little John DD as well. It's a very effective bait. It's something I've caught a ton of fish on in the last few years. So I wouldn't say that this is any worse than the 6XD. I just think that they both have their place. And I would say that in general, I go for the 6XD when the water temperatures are above 75 degrees. And then when the water temps are below 75 degrees, I go for that Little John DD from Spro. There's one other Spro crankbait that I like actually a lot, but it's pretty pricey, and this is the Outsider DD80. It is a very long build crankbait, but it's a $20 crankbait. It's very expensive for a deep diving crankbait, and if you hang it up, it really hurts to lose it. But this bait dies very quickly, and it gets down and stays in that strike zone even better, I find, than that 6XD. So if you wanted a bait that really gets down that strike zone, digs around, and does come through cover really well, that Spro Outsider DD works pretty well. And I've caught, I think one day I've had like 30 or 40 fish on one of these crankbaits in a fishing trip on Beaver Lake. So it's definitely a fish catcher as well. I would just say for the money, probably the 6XD is going to get the job done, and you can buy 3 of these 6XDs to 1 of the Spro baits. I'm not sponsored by Spro or Strike King, by the way. These are just the baits I throw. So there's a lot of other deep diving crankbaits in the market. There's the Rapala series that are really popular. There's the Norman lineup of crankbaits. There's a lot of Japanese deep diving crankbaits out there in the market as well. I've just found though that these 2 Spro crankbaits, that Strike King 6XD and that Spro DD, Little John DD, are my 2 go-to deep diving crankbaits. They get the job done for me, they're relatively affordable, and I have had a lot of success with them. There is one crankbait though that is kind of a sleeper pick for me, and I would say that I have won more tournaments on this deep diving crankbait than any other bait when I was fishing tournaments back in the 2010 range, and that's the Strike King Series 6 crankbait. The Strike King Series 6 is very unique in the sense that it has almost the exact same body shape of that 6XD crankbait. It's basically the exact same profile, but the bill is a little bit sturdier. It's a little bit thicker on the front here, and on top of that, the bait runs a little bit shallower. And there are a few advantages to this. First, this bait runs a little bit shallower and doesn't dig so much into the bottom, so it actually comes through shallow rock a lot better than your 6XD crankbait. Now you may be wondering, why do you want to throw a deep diving crankbait in shallow rock? Well, I've found that I can put this bait on 20-pound fluorocarbon line or like 17-pound monofilament line and crank shallow rock piles in 4 to 8 feet of water. Even though this bait is designed to dive in the 12 to 14 foot range, on that 20-pound test, it really only dives about 8 feet deep. And because that bill is long and has a nice big body to it, it will deflect off those rocks, and in dirtier water, I draw a lot of bigger bites with this bait. I have literally won several tournaments, including a college fishing regional championship on Lake Dardanelle with this exact bait, cranking shell beds and rock piles in 4 to 8 feet of water, and absolutely hammered them with this exact bait. I still throw it to this day, that Strike King Series 6. It's something that I feel like gives me an advantage when I'm in those shallow water rocky situations, and a lot of anglers just aren't throwing a bait of this profile because they don't think about throwing a deep diving crankbait in relatively shallow water, 4 to 8 feet. So this is a bait, again, hundreds of fish catches on this deal. The Strike King Series 6 is an absolute fish catcher. So something I've kind of kept in the back pocket for years, and I don't throw it as much as I used to because I actually have another bait that I like to throw as well that I'll probably talk about in another video that works really well also. But I do pull it out every once in a while still, and it catches a bunch of fish. As far as my equipment goes for the deep diving crankbaits, I pretty much throw everything on the exact same setup. The only thing I change is the line. So the rod I use is Denali Covert Light 7'6" medium heavy power moderate action crankbait rod. It is a long rod with a nice parabolic bend, so it bends a lot even halfway through the rod, which is perfect for these treble hook baits. But it's a medium heavy power, so it loads these deep diving crankbaits well, so you can make a really long cast. You want to get long casts with your deep diving crankbaits because if you make too short of a cast, that bait won't get down to depth soon enough and it won't get into the strike zone at the right time. You want to cast that bait really far past wherever you're fishing, maybe 20, 30, 40 feet at minimum, past where you're trying to fish, because you need to give that bait a chance to get down to depth, hit the bottom, and then get in the strike zone. So if you can make 100 or 150 foot casts with this deep diving crankbait, it's going to be in the strike zone longer and you're going to get more bites. You'll also get that bait deeper to its maximum depth, which is another consideration with your gear, is the line. If you use lighter line, this crankbait will get slightly deeper. It's not that big of a difference. I would say that every 2 pounds of test, so like going from 12 to 14 to 16 pound test, will get you about an extra half a foot out of the crankbait. It's not that big of a deal, but if you go from 20 pound test to 12 pound test, you can get an extra couple of feet out of this deep diving crankbait, which can make a big difference. Also, if you go from monofilament line to fluorocarbon line, you can get a small bit of extra distance or depth, out of this crankbait. And again, it's not a big deal, but if you go from like 14 pound monofilament to 12 pound fluorocarbon, again, you might get another extra foot out of that crankbait. So I go with 12 pound fluorocarbon line most of the time when I'm deep cranking to maximize the depth. But if I'm fishing a bait like that Strike King Series 6, where I don't really care about the maximum depth all that much, I will instead go for like 17 to 20 pound fluorocarbon or even monofilament to really get that bait to run shallower. And I also don't worry so much about making those super long casts. That bait gets down to depth pretty quickly, so I don't have to like bomb my cast as much, but I will use the same rod and setup. Just go to heavier line with that Strike King Series 6 crankbait. So that's pretty much it, guys, for this video. Kind of the basics of how I pick a deep diving crankbait. I'm gonna be going more into color selection, some modifications I make to these crankbaits in future videos. So if you enjoyed this video and want more details on deep diving crankbaits, definitely subscribe to the Bass Fishing Declassified YouTube channel for more content like this. I plan on getting into the areas and retrieves and everything, so gotta spread the content out because I want to make 3 videos a week, so can't make every video 45 minutes long, but we're going to get into all of it by the time everything is said and done, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss these upcoming videos. We'll see you all next one.